Hi, welcome ladies and gentlemen. In this particular lesson, we're going to be actually covering three lessons. Lesson 7.1, 7.2, and 7.3, where we look at percents to fractions, percent to proportions, and percents to decimals. A percent is a ratio whose denominator is 100. You're going to want to make sure that you get that into your notes because that's an important feature of this. Most of this material is not going to be new to you, but we'll be looking at it in different perspectives. So make sure you're taking notes, looking for the learning target, and writing down things you have questions on. Okay, let's continue. All right, we're being asked to write 31% and 60% as a fraction in its simplest form. So let's start with the 31%. If I want to write it in its simplest form, I was just told a percent is simply a fraction with 100 as its denominator. So I'm going to write this as a fraction. I get 31 over 100. Well, 31 is a prime number so that it doesn't have any factors besides 1 and 31. So I know that I cannot reduce it any further. So therefore, this is done. It was that easy. I just wrote 31 over 1. No, not always going to be so easy. With 60%, I'm going to write 60% over 100 to write it as a fraction, but it did say the simplest form, so I'm not done. But the first thing I see is I can take off my zeros on the end, which leaves me to 6 tenths. Well, 6 tenths can be divided by 2, so that's going to give me 3 fifths. Now, one way I can check to make sure my work is correct when I've simplified like this, and go, how do I go from 5 to 100? Well, 20 times 5 would give me 100. 20 times 3 would give me 60, so I can check it and say it did work. So now I want to see, I have the fractions, and they want me to write them as percents. So 3 over 10. Well, how do I go from 10 to 100? I multiply by a 10. If I multiply the denominator by a 10, I multiply the numerator by a 10. So 10 times 10 is 100. 3 times 10 is 30. There we are. And it says write it as a percent. So now I just need to write it 30. I still am struggling with those threes. 30%. Now I have 4 fifths. How do I take 4 fifths and move it to a fraction or a ratio so that I can then get it to a percent? Well, how do I go from 5 to 100? Oh, some of you remembered I said 20 a little bit ago, didn't I? So 5 times 20 gives me 100. If I do that to the denominator, I've got to be equal and do it to the numerator. 4 times 20 is 80. So I'm going to write that as 80 over 100. And I can rewrite that as 80%. So go ahead and take a moment to copy down these notes as I go ahead and change to erase them, and make sure you're moving through the material. Okay, so finding a percent of a number using fractions. So let's look at some of the information we know. In a survey of 85 people, 20 of them said they usually eat crackers with soup. How many people in the survey said they usually eat crackers with soup? So we know we have 85 people and 20% of them said they do. So I have 20% of the 85 people that eat crackers. I can write 20% in a few ways. I can write it as a decimal equivalent as 5/100ths, or I can write it as 1/5. So we're going to be using fractions, so I'm going to look at the 1/5. Remember, if I had 20 over 100, I can simplify that, and then I would get, oh, if my buttons work, 2 over 10, or 1/5. So I'm going to take 1/5 times the 85 people, and I'm going to get 85 over 5. When I simplify, I get 17 people said they usually eat crackers with their soup. Go ahead and take a moment to pause so that you can capture the notes down in the practice as I go ahead and clean up and get ready for the next slide. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, so far it's probably been pretty easy. This should still be pretty easy as we continue, but we're going to be looking at things in proportions, which we have just talked about in our last topic, and you need to make sure you get this in your notes because you're going to see it on the next three slides. Probably consider that to be a pretty important piece. What it says is you can represent A, which as is a part, is P, which is the percent of B, also known as base, using the proportion of A over B equals P over 100. So part over base, sometimes we call the base whole, so part over whole equals the percent over P. So let's see. We have the proportion. What percent of 9 is P? Well, we know we're looking for percent because it's telling us what percent. So we know we're dealing with the numbers 9 and 5. So we're looking at, well, 5 is going to be the A, or the part, and 9 is my base, or my whole, and I need it to become equal to part, so percent over 100, or P over 100. So I need to do this by, oops, 1 second, I just messed up. Okay. So I need to think about how I'm going to do this. My goal is going to be to isolate P. So we're using our information about equations. So I need to multiply both sides by 100 over 1, or I could say 100. Because remember, putting a 1 in the denominator changes nothing. So what this will give me is, let me write this over here so you remember what we did. 100 times 5/9 equals 100p over 100. So these are the identity properties, so that makes that 1p. This is going to be 500 over 9 because we're multiplying. When I simplify, I'm going to get a repeating decimal. I get 55.5. So 5 is 55, actually that's repeating, 55.5% repeating. You could do an estimate of 56%. That would have also been acceptable. You just need to read the answer and see if it's asking for an exact to the 10th, to the 100th, or an estimation. So careful reading on these. So make sure you pause to take these notes down and you get the work so that you can be successful. And any questions you may have, write those down too. Okay, so we're looking at another percent problem, and let's see. Again, you can represent the part is the percent of the base using the proportions. So this time we're looking for what is the number. So we're going to be trying to solve and find what is the missing number, what is the base. So if we know, actually I guess we're not looking for the base. We're looking for the part. We're looking for the A. So if we know that 15% of 300, we know this is going to be 15 because it told us 15% of 300. So that's going to be our total. So now I need to come over here and say, well, what am I going to do to go from here to here? Well, this should be 15 again. And this again is 300. What do I need to do? I want to get A by itself, so I can multiply this by 300. When I do that, this is going to make the identity property, and this is going to be 1A. I'm going to multiply this by, well, my pen just went up crazy, didn't it there? I like tried to hook on to that 15. So 300 times 15 divided by 100. So I'm going to multiply each side by 300. Remember, the reason I'm doing that is to get A by itself. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, when we do that multiplication, we're going to get 4,500, and I'm just trying to figure out where to write this. Because 30 times 15, and then we divide that by 100, I get 45. So 45 is 15% of 300. So if we're reading this, is means equals and of indicates multiplication. So this tells me if I take 15% and I multiply it by 300, I will get 45. That's another way you can always check this. So make sure you're copying. Go ahead and pause because I'm going to clear up the board and move to the next one. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, see, I told you each of these slides is going to be here, percents and proportions, kind of important. You really want to make sure you know this piece. And you want to know what A stands for, the B stands for, and the P stands for. Okay, so let's see. Student council election. You receive 189 votes, so we know we probably need that. or 45% of the votes. In the student council election, how many students voted? So how many total students? We want to know the total, which sometimes member base is the same as total. So I'm looking for my total. 189 is part of the total of the voters. So I know this is going to be 89. It told me 45%. So I know I'm going to write 45 over 100. So now I need this one that's recommending we do cross multiply. So let's do that. And I'm going to change pen colors real quick so we can see the different work here going on. We'll go black. We'll just go basic. So if I take 45B, because I'm cross multiplying, and 89 times 100, and I think they would have done it differently, and you can do it differently. Then I'm going to get 45B, pretty simple on that side, right? But then I get 8,000 and 900. So now I need to take this B and isolate it. So I'm going to divide by 4 on both sides. When I do that, what do I find the answer to be? Sorry, I noticed a little mistake. I said 4B, I meant 45B. I didn't bring the B down. Equals 8,900 divided by 4. Well, when I do that multiplication, I come up with an interesting number. I come up with, I'm going to be dividing both sides by 4. I get 197.7 repeating. Can I have a 7/10 of a person? No, I can't. So it's going to be 198. So we have 198 students who voted in the election. This is when we find the base. We're looking for the total people who started in this. Go ahead and pause as you take notes so that I can clean the board. Okay. So ladies and gentlemen, this is our last slide, and this is percents and decimals. And this should be a pretty painless, I would think, for you. To write a decimal as a percent, you move the decimal 2 places to the right, and you add the percent sign. Oh, that's not going to work. I thought maybe if I wrote in cursive, so I'm going to add the percent sign. To write a percent as a decimal, you move the decimal point 2 places to the left, and you remove the percent side. So here you're adding, here you're removing. Okay, so if we take this, we have 0.17. We want to make it a percent. So we are going to go 1, 2 places. So this becomes 17%. If I have 7%, then I need to move my decimal 2 places. So I have 7/10 of a percent. I need to move my decimal 2 places. 1, 2. So I'm moving my decimal, and I'm going to write 0, 0, 7. So as a decimal, it's written as 7/1000ths. So to write a fraction as a decimal, and we write a decimal as a percent. So we're going to write this as a decimal, 4/9. So we need to figure out what would 4/9 be. And we get point 4, and it's a repeating. So I'm going to give it that little hat. And if I want to write it as percent, I need to move it 2 places. So it becomes 40. I'm doing so well, right? Percent. And I didn't round up because 4 would go down, so I didn't have to round up to 45 or anything. Now it's asking me to find 18% of 3,000. So in order for me to do that, I need to write this as a decimal, and then I find out what 0.18 times 1,300 equals, and that's going to be 234. Oh, my 2 looks so wonderful, and my 3. But at least hopefully you're understanding what I'm writing. So go ahead and make sure you get notes. Remember, this is telling you to add let me close those because it looks a little like an S. And then this is removing the percents, and you're moving to the right when you add the percent sign, and when you're making a decimal, a percent to a decimal, you're going to the left, and you're removing the percent sign. Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. This was the last of this particular lesson.